Hello and welcome back to World Traveler Cooking, the show where we cover interesting foods and interesting cuisines from around the world. This time, Oxsenschwanzsuppe. Now, I've said many times, not so much on this channel, but I will say it here probably for the first time, and you'll hear it many more times from me, that there's no such thing as a throwaway cut of meat, and one person's throwaway cut is another person's delicacy. This is very true, particularly for the humble oxtail here, which has been eaten around the world pretty much ever since we've been slaughtering cows, but particularly in some countries like the US, it has traditionally been a throwaway cut, although that's changed a lot because now people are realizing they're really good and you can cook them amazingly, and so the price has gone way up. So one of the big lessons here is if you learn to cook the challenging and difficult to cook cuts of meat, then culinary possibilities open wide. Now, I've already done an Indonesian oxtail soup. I'll put a link to that in the description down below. But today we're going to do a German one. So Oxsenschwanzsuppe literally means oxtail soup. Now, the ingredients are relatively simple. We have onions. Okay, we're going to use 1 onion for 1 kilogram of oxtails. This is about a kilogram of oxtails is probably enough for maybe 3 people. Maybe more, depending on how you want to stretch it. Then we'll have our traditional German soup veggies. 3 carrots, 1 leek, and I'll use about 1/8 of this celery root. We will season this with 6 allspice berries, a teaspoon of black peppercorns. These are optional, but I'm adding a teaspoon of juniper berries as well. You can use 2 or 3 bay leaves. These are pretty small, so I'm adding 3. And 1 teaspoon of thyme as well. We will add salt. And then later we will make a roux from 40 grams of butter and 40 grams of flour. That should be a couple tablespoons of each. And we will add some white port and or red wine to that, your choice. We will also add water. Some recipes call for beef broth, tomato paste, or tomatoes. But the difficulty is that because oxtails have such a special flavor, you might overwhelm them with beef broth. So I think it's better to make the broth yourself in the process of cooking the meat. So, with that being said, I'm going to rough cut my veggies. And we'll also use some cooking fat to brown everything. And then we'll come back, we'll start browning the oxtails and cooking the veggies. Let's get started. So you could use vegetable oil for this, but more traditional in German cooking would be a couple tablespoons of animal fat. And we're going to let this heat up. Then we are going to brown our oxtails in batches, adding more fat as necessary. One thing to keep in mind about oxtails is they vary quite a lot in fat content, and so you might have to add more or not. But again, animal fat's traditional here. Once the fat is hot, I'm going to start adding oxtails and browning them a little. Once they've browned, we take them out and brown them on both sides. And once these are all done, then we'll get to the next step. And now, next step is we add our onion. And now we add our onion. Pan is really hot, so we've got to be careful. Now that the onions have cooked down a bit, I'm going to add my root veggies, and we'll cook these. Now that these are starting to visibly cook, I'm going to add my leeks, and normally you won't use the green parts of leeks for most things, but since this is a soup, and these are going largely into a broth, we will use the whole leek. So we're just going to cook this until the leeks are starting to cook, and then we add our oxtails back in and add our water. All right, I think we're good. So adding the oxtails back in, and we will add a total of 2 liters of water, and then a decent amount of salt. Remember, we will adjust later, so if it's a little too little, then that's fine. Now we're going to bring this to a simmer, and we will simmer this for about 3 hours. So this has been simmering for about 2.5 hours, and the oxtails are now reasonably tender. So we're going to start removing the broth and then separating the vegetables from the meat, and then we'll process things. So now I have put all of my broth through the sieve, and I'm going to basically take some of, and I've separated out the oxtails, and I'm going to take each of my bits of vegetables, and I'm going to try to mash it through the sieve as well. Now into the final stage, we will start by adding our 40 grams of butter, and we will melt this. We will add to it our 40 grams of flour. So now in goes the flour, and we will whisk this and cook it to form a brown roux. So we're actually going to let the flour brown a bit, and we'll whisk it during this process. Now, once you can start to see this darken, noticeably, it doesn't have to get super dark. I'm going to add maybe about 2 half ladles to just kind of get the thickening process going. It's good to kind of get stuff incorporated, as it would if we were making a sauce. And then add a bit more. Once I get into the porridge stage, I will add my wine, and then we'll continue adding. Broth. So some people just use the German red wine for this, and they won't use the Madiera. German red wines are a little sweeter and not as acidic. I'm using an Italian red wine because it's what I have. Keep in mind, Italian red wines are more acidic, which is why I'm cutting it with the white port. So I'm just going to take a little bit here for a taste test. Get a little bit of meat in there. This is a nice rich broth. And I'm going to garnish with a little bit of green onion. The garnish didn't do much, so maybe I'll leave that off next time. But this looks very German as far as food goes. It's brown and it smells delicious. Let's go ahead and try a taste test.